Hey, Jack Matirko, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, Andy. How are you? What are we doing today?
We are going to be talking to Kaytlin Bailey.
I
And
always like talking to Kaytlin Bailey. She's been how many she's been on this show a couple times. She was on the podcast like 3 or 4 times. We've been keeping up with Kaytlin for a few years now. Always great to talk to her. Very important issues.
right, she's doing a new one-woman show about this history of sex work.
Which has been her jam for a long time on her podcast.
Indeed. And the name of the show is Whore's Eye View. And it's it looks pretty incredible, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, you're gonna play the demo.
I'll play the demo.
Commercial. You'll play that later once we're talking to Kaytlin.
Exactly. So how have you been doing, Jack? How's everything where you are?
Pretty good. Stuff at the Satanic Estate is moving along just fine. We're very happy with how that's going. I don't know, a bunch of stuff is up in the air right now. We'll see what goes on between now and Halloween, because we're trying to pull. We did Unveiling Day, and if you haven't seen any of that stuff, a bunch of that stuff is over at the satanictemple.tv right now. So go check it out because it's really cool. And we're in kind of a lull now between now and October. And of course, October is Halloween. So we're going to be doing shows every Friday, Saturday in October.
Cool.
At the estate. So go to the Satanic Temple Estate. Keep a track of that. Join the mailing list and all, so you know when those tickets. I know we've got a bunch of cool stuff coming up that I can't really talk about yet because it's not. The ink's not dry. The ink's not dry, Andy. And
there's a lot of things we can't talk about, of course. There's a lot of things we can't talk about, but
that's true.
They'll all just play out when it plays out. I was close to Salem the other day. I was up in one of the surrounding towns. Salem, Massachusetts. I was thinking about dropping in on the temple because I haven't been up there.
They are open. They've got a show right now by Kevin Soling called. Hang on, I was just talking to the museum curator the other day. We've become what we parody, which is I've seen most of the video portions of it. I don't know if he has any physical art. I assume he does, but it's clever.
It sounds clever. I think I would see. Now you just given me a whole new thing to be concerned about. Have I become the thing I parody? As I look at my moniker, Dr. Kennard. Maybe. You
got a pretty good thing, though. I mean, you've got a faux doctor title. I'm kind of rocking early to late Hunter Thompson, somewhere around.
You've got the look, dude. I don't even know what that look is, but you should go to LA because you're like right from Central Casting.
Right from Central Casting, yeah. What are they? Yeah. We need a Russian mobster. Sit there and look surly.
We need someone for John Wick to shoot in the head. And you look like just the guy that could do it.
Can you talk with accent like this?
You talk like an accent. How do you feel about not only getting shot in the head, but he's going to throw you in this arm bar first, and then he's going to shoot you in the head.
Scale? Okay.
Yeah. And that could be your thing. That could be your total thing right there.
Yeah, but Hollywood's not looking for. Are we looking? Because I'm Ukrainian by descent.
And so like you are exactly the dude that John Wick would kill in John Wick for the next 12 John Wick movies, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, well, as soon as they get around to deciding that the Russians are the enemy again and they need vaguely Slavic people.
Right. Totally. Oh man, good times. So yeah, things have been pretty regular here on my channel. Yeah. Nothing as exciting as the satanic industrial complex that you got cooking over there.
We're doing great stuff. It's loads of fun. We're looking to expand. We're doing we're still doing temple services every Tuesday. There's been talk of maybe doing like some other sessions for people who are in other parts of the world.
No,
because Tuesday night at 9 p.m. It's not great if you happen to be in like, Sydney or
Oh yeah, that's true.
or
No, this is true. I know that the temple, the chapter here in Boston, I believe is suing Boston because Boston.
That's true. They just had a court case kind of win. Like they were suing on 3 counts and 2 of them got rejected, but the third one got through. So that case is moving forward. I don't know too much about like who the plaintiff is or what the legal argument is or even which lawyer is arguing it, but I know that that's a thing that's going on. If you're in that area, maybe write to your city council person if you happen to be in Boston.
I'm on the other side of the river. I'm from Somerville. I can't really write in and complain. Well, I guess I can complain about Boston as much as I want to.
This is a thing that one of the things that I enjoy about living out west is that our cities and towns and counties are not so broken up by all these different land masses because it's just big flat open space. So like, if something comes up in Maricopa County is like a third of Arizona.
Yeah.
It's just huge.
Yeah.
But back east, it's, there's a river here. That means it's a new county.
Woo! Yeah. Exactly. So, I think we're just going to roll the tape.
I think so. I think we had a good conversation with Kaytlin. I think it was fun. I think everybody's going to like it.
Always fun talking with her. She has all of this history, a general historical knowledge. And of course, she specializes in the history of sex work. And I learned things. When I talk to her.
Yeah, that is a thing that happens with Kaytlin. She tells you something you don't know, which is kind of part of her gem. Like we should spend more time listening to women in women's trades that are demonized.
Yeah. All right, everyone, check it out. Hey, everyone. It is I, Andrew Hall. You can call me Dr. Kennard. Jack at LED Flashing right over there. And of course, Kaytlin Bailey. What a pleasure it is to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Are you thrilled, Jack?
I'm pretty thrilled. I think we're all very busy. Kaytlin's eating dinner. I've got another meeting in a little bit. Everybody's kind of on the hustle right now.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Meeting in the in-betweens.
In between.
Right.
I thought there might be 1 or 2 people, Kaytlin, who don't know who you are or about your work. So
no way.
It's hard to believe.
I can't imagine that. I've been so obnoxious about it for so long.
And they may... Well, I hear that you're a professional...
hustler, as they would call it.
Hustler. So I have your video for Whore's Eye View queued up. Do you mind if I play it?
Yeah, just go for it. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Then I can eat. That'll be perfect.
Okay.
Just like hunting, prostitution predates us as a species. They all spent, let's call it like $1 million teaching monkeys what money is, right? So they taught a group of captured monkeys that they could exchange tokens for crates that were going to the store. And the first thing that happened is that a boy monkey gave a girl monkey a token, and then they had sex.
My name is Kaytlin Bailey, and I'm a contrarian by nature and a provocateur by trade. You might know me as the host of the Oldest Profession podcast, stand-up comic, or sex worker rights advocate. I founded Old Pro Productions to tell better sex worker stories and to change the stories that we tell about sex work. Whore's Eye View is my second one-woman show. It's part history lecture, part stand-up special, and part very personal story. I started developing the Whore's Eye View as a stand-up comic and on the Oldest Profession podcast and in some very generous people's living rooms throughout New York City. But I wrote and developed the show at the Barbershop Theater in Nashville in January of 2020. And after the year we've had, the whole team at Old Pro Productions is ready to take Whore's Eye View all the way. I started the Oldest Profession podcast in 2017. And through telling other sex worker stories, I discovered that changing the story changes everything. We've been at this a while, and we know that Whore's Eye View will have an impact, but only with your support. The best way to support the show is by becoming a supporter on Patreon, which is how you will get yourself a front row seat and exclusive invites to the show and the movement we're building. Whore's Eye View is going to be a wild ride. Come be a part of it.
Very
Sweet.
professional, Kaytlin.
Thank you. Yeah,
Very-
it's like
very
it
well
doesn't
done.
it doesn't matter how good the lighting is. I still it never stops to amaze. I work so hard to get myself in front of cameras, and I never stop hating my face or the sound of my own voice. It's like I am putting all of my energy to platform, and all I can think when I watch that is just like, what are you doing with your mouth? Like, why would you, what is wrong with your, who taught you that that's something that you should do with your face? But anyway, but yeah, I'd love to hear y'all's reactions because it's probably not wrapped up in trauma.
Oh, it's wrapped up in trauma, but my trauma has nothing to do
Yours,
with your trauma.
not
Come
my, yeah.
on.
You don't have
Let's be
trauma
honest.
with my face. That's not, I mean, I hope not.
To tell you that, I liked it. I thought, like I said, I thought it was a professional 2-minute bit,
Mhm.
and I think you did yourself proud, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. I'm certainly really proud of the show, and I want as many people to see it as possible, because I think it is. I was a history major. I've been obsessed with bodily autonomy and sex workers generally since like before I lost my virginity, and I didn't know about a lot of the stuff that I like uncovered in this work and sort of present in this show. And I think it's really an important missing piece of our national narrative and our sort of like narrative as Western civilization is missing the voices of sex workers to our collective detriment. And also it's funny, I promise.
So tell me how you were able to work, because you have Carol Montgomery who
Yep.
also helped develop it. Tell
Yep.
us about that relationship.
Yeah, so I mean, Carol Montgomery is a sassy old broad in comedy. She's a dinosaur. Like she was a road comic for decades, and really only broke out in her 3 Showtime specials, Women of a Certain Age, very very recently, right? And so she was somebody that I looked up to as like a real comic, somebody who has built a career and went through the gauntlet of, misogyny in the 80s and 90s as a performing woman in comedy, right? And so we connected because I think she gave a talk somewhere that was like how to be a stronger self-advocate, and I was like, that is something that I need. And I showed up or whatever, and when we went out to lunch and I started sort of unloading on her, and she was very sweet and very patient and said, it really sounds like you're working on a show. And a few years later, I came back to her with this, idea had sort of germinated, and she agreed to direct and help me develop and midwife, for lack of a better word, this sort of like messy, expansive process. We've been at this since, over a year before COVID. So it's been a long trek for sure to make sense of these 1,001 threads.
Right. 10,000 years of sex work in 75 minutes.
Yeah.
How do you boil that down? How do you
Massive generalizations and stereotyping, just like erasure of whole swaths of humanity that like doesn't even get mentioned. Just like, I mean, it's a one-woman show, right? It's my story told through this lens of the sex workers that came before me. But I say very early in the show that, like, suffer no delusions here. This is about me, right? The reason that all of the women like look and sound and act and think like me is because they are also white, cis, Western women who were witty and writers, and many of them accumulated. This is my story through history, basically.
Right.
But it just happens to be, sex workers wrote better memoirs in the period before we were letting women read.
Interesting. So you made a choice basically to stay within your lane, so to speak.
Definitely. And we made that decision really early in the development process, because on the podcast we go everywhere, right? We do figures from all over the world and like sort of all different periods and all different perspectives, and it just became really obvious that like this is my show, and so I'm sort of looking for my story in history. Yeah.
Well, what did you learn about yourself then as you're preparing and getting ready for the show, as you're writing the show?
Man. I'm gonna sound like such an innocent that I've been right since I was 13. No,
Wow.
I've been right about everything the whole time. No, sort of that I've been lied to maliciously, and it's I've been wrestling and exploring a lot of the themes of the show for a long time. My father and I were the same age when we both disappointed our mother. Him by joining the army and becoming a professional killer of people, and me by becoming an escort and making people come for money and no health insurance, which is an important distinction. And so, I think that. How do I put this? So much has happened over the last year that kind of revealed why I was so fucking obsessed with these stories, right? Like, and the big reveal on how the story of how important it is for us to protect white women, right, from Black and brown people who are crossing oceans and deserts to kidnap and enslave us and put us in sexual servitude or whatever, how that false narrative that is still perpetuated in this idea of the way that we conceive of like human trafficking, for example, in this country, right? With like soccer moms across the country up in arms about vans with external locks and women checking themselves into motels with acrylic nails and other signs of trafficking, and like how that moral panic and the beliefs that my father internalized about what it meant to protect me from danger, and how that sort of juxtaposes to my own experience of sexual violence, right? Like, it's never been some stranger of color, right? Like, it's never this myth. It's rather people that are closer to me. And one of the things that we like don't teach soldiers, and we don't teach people that are out there committing atrocious violence in the name of protecting, right, like my fucking body, right, is that they're not listening to us, and they're not respecting our boundaries in bed, and they're not like doing the things that might actually protect us from like actual violence. And so that was a big theme. And so like I had been reticent to sort of address racism in my work, because like, like I'm white, my dad's white, like most of my clients were white, it was just like, or I thought that like addressing racism meant speaking to the experience of people of color, right? Like, oh God, how do I complicate the narrative of, women in brothels in the South before slavery is abolished, or like during this period of like, how do we talk about the exploitation of like white women's bodies and Black women's bodies and trans women's, like, how do you do all of it? It's like, I don't have to do all of it. I can just talk about my experience, and like how the mythology of who my father thought was a rapist made it impossible for him to protect or prepare me from like my actual rapist.
Right.
And how much of that was due to Reagan and the Willie Horton ads and stuff like that? Right.
I mean, I was a child during the Southern strategy, but like, that's a rebirth of an old myth, right? Like, this shit goes back before the white slave law of 1910, right? Which is known as the Mann Act. It was on the books until, too late, right? Was never used to rescue any sex slaves, or even for that matter, like prosecute many sex workers, but it did prosecute a lot of interracial couples.
It's difficult for people to imagine that anti-misogyny laws or different people from different races being married where it was illegal. Up until what, 1967, I think?
I think it was like 1916. I want to say 69. I could be making that. It's the Loving versus Virginia case of like 1960 something, right? Yeah. Both of my parents were alive.
Yeah. And that is scary.
Yeah. And it's, it's not new, and it's also not that old, right? I think that we have an idea about like the persecution of like sex workers in particular, right? But of as being this, something that's written onto our DNA as a species, right? And you can see when you pull back a little bit the reaction and sort of waves that this is a response to. We got really, really creeped out about who white middle class women were fucking, right? After the invention of the bicycle, right? Which allowed us to, do two really cool things, right? Go places and also come, right? That was like revolutionary for white women in the 1870s, right? This begins a sort of, contentious buildup, lead up to the women's suffrage movement, right? Which goes through several waves where you have, women fighting and people reacting. And a lot of the anti-prostitution laws and a lot of the demonization of Black and brown men and the framing of white women as being like uniquely susceptible to like the horde of rapists in the world is less about a response to actual violence and more a reaction to this newfound freedom of movement when we had this huge technological leap forward.
Interesting.
Right.
So is there like a small like cluster of that now that the COVID and the vaccines are out and people who have been stuck with each other and realize that they can't stand each other are finally allowed to move around?
Yeah. What are you asking? Are there divorces happening? Like, yes.
Yeah, no,
yes.
there absolutely are. It's divorces and babies one way or the other, right? But yeah. I just think that it's interesting that just because of the way that sociology of the pandemic worked out, you're seeing kind of a resurgence of that as you can't let her out of the home, and
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, fear, people who are scared are scary. That's just a thing that's true about us as a species. We react to fear often with violence, and trying to be scarier than the threat, but it's hard to like intimidate a virus. So, I think that we're living in an increasingly divisive time. I think people are sort of retreating to their ideological caves and their literal spaces. I'm really curious to see what comes out of the pandemic. In my circles, I'm seeing a lot of harm reduction work, right? I'm seeing a lot of like expanding of the idea of community and like connecting. There are Zoom groups that are meeting and sharing resources and sharing tips about how to survive as a member of a criminalized class, right? During this rough patch where all of our social systems are failing all around us.
So that's an interesting question, an interesting topic with COVID-19. From what you've seen, I'm not asking for you to speak about all sex workers, but from what you have seen, has COVID-19 helped normalize sex work in any way?
It's so interesting that you say that, because like on the one hand, I think we're getting more media attention than we have in a while. And on the other hand, I don't think that that's necessarily positive. I think that the pandemic really created a disruption of sex work, right? Like, if people aren't leaving their homes, right? Which is not to say the same that like sex work did not stop during this period. There was never a day on earth where like no sex work was done, but it was a huge like sort of shock and disruption to a system that has already undergone so many disruptions, right? Remember, this is only 2 years after the passage of Esta FOSTA, right? Which erased Backpage, Craigslist erotic services, Rent Boy, like so many tools, so many ecosystems, so many relationships, right? Just erased from the internet. So people are sort of thrown topsy-turvy. And so what I saw was a lot of people who had never done sex work before a day in their life, who are trapped at home, that are facing dire economic need, right, with no way of going out into the world and doing that, who are getting on OnlyFans, who are doing online sex work. I don't think that served to destigmatize sex work at all. I think it sort of showed us, how vulnerable. There are people that are losing their jobs, right, because they were caught on OnlyFans. Payment processors like MasterCard and Visa are being barred from, supporting the exchange of erotic content, right? You don't even have to be in person. Like there's a lot of
Apple said that they're not going to allow any apps that can be interpreted as being used for sex work.
Yeah, so that's like
it's just like Tinder and Grindr and everything, right?
Yeah, like it's literally all of it. That's the thing about the oldest profession, is that it's fucking everywhere. We are everywhere, and this idea that we should make it harder to get money into the hands of vulnerable people is some kind of like savior crusade. I just think is really a willful misinterpretation of like how help works. And so that's what I'm seeing that ties so much to my story of like being raised in this abstinence only education environment, being raised by a father that thought like one of the worst things that could happen to a daughter was that like I would have sex one day, and like being in that world and then sort of experiencing like actual hardship, actual frustrations, but it was just such a violation of the gendered narrative, right? Like we are cracking down on prostitution with the full force and violence of the state. We are sending SWAT teams into immigrant-owned massage parlors. We are busting down doors of people's homes. We are paying police officers to engage in sexual activity with people before arresting them and confiscating their money, which would be rape and any other conduct. All of that. We're doing all of that in the name of cutting down on human trafficking, and it's bananas to me, and it lines up so neatly with all of the things that I was told were done in my protection to protect me, right, from things I didn't want to be protected from. That was actually a form of coercive violence.
Well, it's the nature of moral panics, isn't it?
Right.
That you have this explosion of hysteria, and when you talk about this anti-trafficking, drive going on, it's just another kind of this it's a species-wide issue, but it's very American at the same time.
It's very American, and we get into that. There's a long legacy of that, right? You know, like we adopted the American plan, which is a response to the British called it the Contagious Diseases Acts, but essentially we criminalized female promiscuity in the name of national security, right? Because we had to protect our soldiers from the duplicity of women, right? Because promiscuous women are vectors of disease, whereas soldiers are just innocent youths, drawn astray by the ancient siren call of the dirty parts of women or whatever, right? And you can trace
their upper brain is just too stupid to overcome that lizard brain urge to fuck, and we just can't.
Right. It's like we can either make them run into hills and kill other people, or we can make them immune to, sexual overtures. We cannot do both.
It's either going to be violence or coming. There's no Right.
And we don't want them to get too satisfied because people that have come recently won't shoot other people. That's science, I think. I don't know. I'm making stuff up, but no, but you can draw a straight line from that to the history of Europe during the scientific revolution and the industrial age, and like sort of back behind that the rationalists, and back behind that the Renaissance, and before that the medieval period and the Holy Roman Empire, and the myths that we chose to misinterpret from ancient Greece and ancient Rome all the way back to the Syrian Empire. Like you go back and back and back, and you're sort of like peeling back these layers, and you get to these old ancient stories, and you're like, oh, holy shit. We've just been lying to ourselves over and over and over again for 6,000 fucking years. And that's the play.
So that's what you want people to take away.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's I'm sassy, but it's 75 minutes of a mad dash, right? Like I'm pulling from a lot of different places, and I'm interweaving it into this personal narrative of like, I care about this because of me, right? But like I've been driven because of this obsessive mind, right? Which is both, the gift and a curse or whatever, of like, I just couldn't let it go. And so, as I said in the video, I started this podcast. You can go back. We've done over 75 episodes, right? Each one is a deep dive into a different sex worker from history. But like, I have been studying the public women that came before me, right? And I feel like I'm sort of coming out of that with like a warning to public women now, and I mean that in the broadest possible sense.
Yeah. So what sex worker from history, and I'm sure you get this question quite a bit, which sex worker from history do you most identify with?
I chose 3 in the piece, but I think it would have to be Veronica Franco, who is a 16th century Venetian courtesan who became a famous and accomplished writer during a period and in a place where women of her class were literally not allowed to read. And I think that's an incredible accomplishment. And she died disgraced and penniless from fever in the poorest red light district in Europe because the tides turned against her, and a society that had embraced her and had made space for her genius demonized her work and used her ambition to fully exile her, despite the fact that she won her case in court.
That seems to be a theme from what I've seen of your podcast, from what I've heard. There seems to be this cyclic nature that women obtain power, society, there is a space for them. And then, patriarchy realizes what's going on.
Oh, shit. Right. Yeah. The bleeders are talking to each other. This is dangerous. Sorry.
No. That's fine. That's fine. So what's the remedy as we are going what seems to be a more perhaps a more liberalizing part of our history right now? What's the solution from the cycle from happening again?
I mean, the closest thing to a policy proposal that I come to in the show is mass ritual castration. So like I don't know how far we're gonna get with that. But I do think it is more sex worker stories, right? It is more and different kinds of people fully expressing like their story and their narrative and integrating that into the communities that we're already a part of, right? But that I think that we should recognize that like silence and shame are common enemies and not tools that we should use to make like family dinner more quiet or like whatever the objective is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you had any blowback from women about your work?
Not yet, but only like 9 people have seen this. So like I wouldn't expect, it's hard. Like I've been able to make eye contact with everyone who's seen the show.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Have you had any really harsh what's the harshest criticism you've had of the show so far?
My aunt accidentally texted me thinking that she was texting her friend that she brought, and she thought that it was too long, which I actually think was a really fair critique because she came to a sort of an early reading, and it was too long.
Oh, really? So how long was that particular reading?
It was 85 minutes. It was like I went 10 minutes over, but like, when you're watching somebody read, it's not fully memorized. A little, it's not fully there yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the nature of the table read.
Yeah, the performance piece, right? It's a development run. So yeah.
Yeah. So cutting out that 10 minutes or so, 15
Yeah,
minutes?
Yeah, and it's partially it's performance, and partially it's like, there is a lot of stuff that was in there that is no longer there. As the end piece becomes clear, like more and more falls off.
So here's a question. If you didn't get that text from her.
Oh yeah, no, I knew it was too long in my body as it was happening. Right. Like, yeah. Absolutely. That's
It's funny how you should say that in my body, because when you're typing it, you're like, I am fucking genius.
Absolutely.
This is incredible.
This is such an important sentence because it's so rhetorically cool.
Even the semicolon, especially the fucking semicolon.
It's important to put the M dashes into the script. You won't just know to.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's been work, but it's also been fun at the same time.
It has. I'm in the I mean, this as a performer, right? I'm in the memorization and rote and drilling piece of it, which always feels like a chore. Why am I doing this to myself?
Right. So in terms of what you've done so far with performing it, reading it, performing it in front of people, have you learned something about the beats of the story or how you deliver a line?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there there are jokes that are working that will continue to work, and there are jokes that will work better, and there are more jokes, and like the only metric I care about is laughter because of the comedy disease that I'm a part of, but also there, it's a one-woman show. You can't get out of there dry-eyed. That would be a violation of the craft.
Exactly.
It's not a one-person show if somebody doesn't cry.
It's just mostly comedy. You will feel other emotions.
It's a lot of comedy. It's also a lot of lecture, right? Like it's, imagine you're like funny professor drunk and also like really going through something.
Just working out stuff here.
Right. Yeah.
So you're in Queens doing.
Yes, I'm at QED in Astoria, Queens. It's Cambry Cruises venue. It's incredible. It's a really great space for development because it's one of those cool spaces that like feels full at 25 but could accommodate 75. So, come bring your friends.
Now, do you still have tickets available for this?
Absolutely. You can go to whoreseyeview.com. There are tickets available for every Sunday in August at 7 p.m. And then, get on our mailing list. Keep going back to that website because this is not the last place we are performing the show.
Right. So where do you think you're going to be taking the show after that?
I don't know. It sort of depends on how good this one goes, That's, yeah.
And where the Delta variant hotspots are at the time.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. One thing I have learned over the last year is stop trying to predict the future. Yeah.
Your life is hard enough.
Bigger. We knew the South was not going to vaccinate, right? We knew that was the thing.
It's not. It's what I mean. Speaking as a Southerner, I want to say that like all of the dumb fucks that I know who aren't vaxxed, are at my fighting gym and speak with a Staten Island accent. But like, that's just, right.
Fair point.
We got dummies all over the country. That's
not
fine.
like a great motto for the country.
That's yeah. Bring us your dummies. We got you. We don't
Very
though, as we don't have health insurance. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. So the last time that we talked, I believe it was in the midst of the pandemic, and
yes.
You were in North Carolina.
Was I feeding the possums yet, or did that come later?
It would not surprise me to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I left that conversation going, I hope she's okay. I hope she's going to be okay.
I mean, no big deal. Yeah, I started. We all have our drugs, and work is mine. So I started a production company and an advocacy group, and all it as ways of avoiding finishing writing this play.
Did you have production companies and stuff? Did you problems with, because the topic that you work with is sex work and stuff? Do you have problems with financing and funding and bank accounts and that kind of thing?
Yes, we do. It's so funny you mentioned that actually, because our first year of the Old Pro project, which was, we paid over 200 artists across the country to create works of art that celebrated sex worker history. And we did all mediums, right? We did a music video, we did murals, we did a zine, we did like all kinds of cool shit was coming out. But what we were doing is we were paying sex worker storytellers who were also sex workers. So a lot of these bitches are flagged, right? Of like, this is suspicious. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to give this person $200?
Are you sure they were on stage?
What are you doing?
Anything sexy?
Right. What are you paying her for? Why are there people in New Orleans and Seattle? Are you a sex tourist during a pandemic? And so we had a lot of tense conversations with Chase representatives of like, I need to pay the people I say that I'm paying, that I'm trying to pay with the money that I have in my account. Thank you. I need that to work.
And it can't be my account because that's why I got an LLC.
Right. Yeah. No, and then the other thing is that we have started or in the process of starting a nonprofit, and so the work that we do is fiscally sponsored. So we were able to accept nonprofit donations, which opens up this whole other world of shit that you have to do from a banking perspective. So what I've learned to do is hire professional dominatrixes, because those people love spreadsheets and are willing to dot their I's and cross their T's in a way that like GFE freaks like me just like cannot. So yeah.
I never thought that dominatrixes, though it makes perfect sense. Now
Right.
that,
Yeah. If you're looking for somebody to get shit done to specifications, right? Like that's who you're looking for.
that is incredible. That's something I'm going to have to jot down in case I ever need someone to do spreadsheets. So, Kaytlin, what else about the show that you want to talk about? If we, is there something that we didn't really touch on?
I mean, it's also, I think it's presented as a history of sex work, which it kind of is, right? It's certainly a history of like Western sex work, right? If like the Western, this is, Western civ for whores, right? But it's also,
is there a workbook too?
I wish I wish
You
so
should
much.
totally have a workbook.
I think that there should be a quiz at the end of the show.
If you're
I think
touring with this, there should definitely be one on the
there
mercy
should
table.
definitely be a quiz. Yeah,
Like a little,
absolutely.
informational booklet. Like, yeah.
That's a great idea, actually. Of like, here, take this quiz and see how much of this you retained. What is Kaytlin's dad's deal? No, I'm kidding. That's an essay. That's not a multiple choice. But I think one of the things that I discovered and reinforced and really dug into was how intertwined the history of sex work is with the history of women, right? And our conception, misogyny and whorephobia are very much intertwined. And I am sort of operating under the belief that like if you kill one, you can kill the other, right? And like you can't actually kill misogyny without addressing whorephobia. And so much of this play is a call to solidarity with people that identify as feminists and trying to help explain how my oppression is actually our oppression. That we should ask people like Lena Dunham and we should ask people like, it's like I forgot every famous actress that made this their platform, whatever. Gloria Steinem, I think, is a famous example, like to call off the literal hunt, right? That like, yeah.
You just said something really profound, and it's resonating through my addled mind at this point. And that whorephobia and misogyny, they are one and two. They're entwined together in a really,
absolutely.
In a really intimate kind of way. Yeah. So, and I should have asked this question. It should have been one of my first questions.
Whatever.
But
Forgive yourself.
Oh, that's really hard, Kaytlin.
It's
that's
really hard. It's really hard.
What are you doing asking me to do
I know. You got to do your work. You got to forgive yourself.
You're not the first guest who's come across, or co-host who's like, you should go a little bit easier on yourself, Andy. But so operationally speaking, in terms of a definition for a sex worker, because I think when most people think of sex work, they think of prostitution.
Prostitution, right, which is a legal term, totally. Yeah.
So talk about the different shades and varieties of sex work.
Yeah, sex work is a really big, broad umbrella term that means any kind of erotic labor, right? And when I say that this could mean anything, I need you to believe me. This could mean anything, right? This is foot fetish models. This is, people that are doing feather murals, right? These are people that are doing in-person sex work, that are doing online sex work, that are doing phone sex work, right? These are, I personally, right, because I'm building a political coalition, want to include like Hooters waitresses and anyone who has ever modeled lingerie. But there's the word whore and the whorephobia that comes with it has been applied to adulterers, women that are walking alone, right? So like the legal definition of prostitution, of exchanging specifically sexual acts for money or something of value, doesn't really contain the symbolic, right? The bucket of beliefs that go with our visceral repulsion to the oldest profession.
Right.
Yeah. So it's sort of like prostitution is the like art. Maybe archetypal isn't quite right. We get into it in the show. There's too much to cover. It's just asterisk. But like, we hold up, I would argue, not just prostitution, but a very particular sort of stylized account of prostitution, right? This sort of, woman whisked away like a moth to a flame and fell down, and then she ended up just terrible. And on, I think today's version would be meth or heroin or like whatever the drug is, but like go back to the 1950s and like she was smoking reefer and went down the wrong path. And it's this story of a fallen woman, right? Or somebody who was victimized by a sex trade that sort of lays there like a trap. And that is very much wrapped up in our sort of racialized idea of what sex trafficking looks like in this country and what it means for women to engage in erotic labor.
What do you think of openly conservative sex workers? Like there was this thing the other week where I can't remember, some porn actress went to a Turning Point USA thing.
I mean, I was just at Freedom Fest, so it's like I'm a Machiavellian whore who's willing to talk to anyone who's willing to give us money. And if you don't believe that you can do good work with bad men's money, then like you do not support sex workers, because that's like literally all we do. But yeah,
like showing up at the thing and
totally
like wanting the exposure. Yeah.
Yes, there are sex workers have always been all kinds of people. That's it. It's the full spectrum of humanity is represented in every aspect of this work. Buyers, sellers, all of it. We are everywhere. So yes, I don't make a tribal claim. Like I'm not rushing to hang out with somebody who thinks that like Rush Limbaugh had like a lot of good ideas, but I respect that we are also fighting for their right to be wrong and not be arrested for exchanging erotic labor for money.
Right, but don't you think that trying to pushing the sex work rights narrative in that space at this point is, at least for now, kind of a very kind of dead argument? Like they're just not going to accept it into their media narrative.
I disagree, actually. I had a lot of traction at Freedom Fest with conservative, political action committees, with people that are doing this work. There's a lot of libertarian arguments to be made. There's a lot of pro-cop arguments to be made, actually. Like people that don't believe in defunding the police believe that, like, police officers being paid to have sex with sex workers is like minimum a bad look, right? At least. So there's a lot of, I believe that prostitution and the decriminalization of prostitution and sex work is a philosophical key that opens a lot of doors. I think it's easier to get my racist uncle to talk about how dumb it is, right, to arrest sex workers than it is for him to recognize the problems of redlining. Right. Yeah. And so I think that you can start a lot of really important conversations in these spaces. I do think it's like part of my responsibility as a white person to like put myself in those places and engage in those conversations. Speaking to this person, like, I don't think there's an ideological litmus test for thinking it's dumb to arrest like adults for doing grown up stuff with each other. And I welcome anyone that agrees with me on that issue to like help support it in any way that makes sense to them. But
it sounds like you're saying that it's the sharp end of the spear, so to speak.
Yes.
It's a wedge.
It's definitely
of topic that you can get into communities that you wouldn't normally have access to and talk about possibly just one thing or possibly a broad range of things.
Absolutely. And so like, one of the things that I as an advocate am trying to do is get in front of more religious leaders, specifically Southern Baptists, right? Specifically people on the conservative end of the spectrum who have dedicated a huge part of their life to, fighting abortion access in this country, right? And bring up this issue because if you read the Bible, Jesus spent a lot of time with sex workers and was like super chill about it. And I think that this might be, I think that there are opportunities for earnest conversations to happen in this space. And the more resources and vitriol and fear we can take out of this in those spaces, the better and easier and more effective all of this work is going to be.
Kaytlin, let's say I have a friend who's a sex worker. What are the things I shouldn't be saying?
Let's just say.
Well, no. Well, let's say someone, right?
Sure.
A hypothetical person has a friend who's a sex worker. What are the things that they shouldn't be saying to them?
I can't believe you sell your body. right? That's like, that's an obvious one. My mother said that to me during a therapy appointment, and I was like, see? And I also said, like, I didn't. I still have it. I think it's important for us to recognize that sex work and sex workers are service providers, that sex work is a service. We are not ourselves commodities. I think that is a really important distinction.
And
to
I
make.
just want to say that this is like capitalism wants to make you a commodity.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all whores in a capitalist system in the bad, derogatory way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Continue.
No, you're fine. It's I think it's important to come to these conversations from a place of curiosity and rejecting the things that you think that you know. If somebody tells you that they're a sex worker, you might have a really specific image in your head about like what that means. And the, craft and economy of sex work is vast and deep, so you might not actually know. I think it's always a great opportunity to ask curious questions, not to be confused with judgmental gotcha questions.
Awesome. Well, I think I think that's our time.
Sweet. This was really, really fun. Thank you so much for having me. And if I didn't say it enough, please go to whoreseyeview.com.
Well, thanks again, Kaytlin.
Always good.